everyone. Time for the next session. We've got two amazing, really interesting, quite short, sharp presentations. The first one on travel and then the next one on waste. So I'm Vikki. I'm Head of Sustainability for Live Nation for UK and Ireland. So I'm going to be your host for these two next sessions. Not much speaking from me. I want the presentations to shine and let the information through. So first and foremost, we have let me get my notes. First and foremost, we have Glenn. Glenn is the Mott MacDonald Professor of Future Mobility at the University of the West of England. He's also current Vice President of the Chartered Institute of Highways and Transportation. He's super passionate and outspoken about the need for climate action within and beyond the transport sector, as I think we're about to find out. Over to you, Glenn.
Thanks, Vikki. Hello, GEI! Looking forward to saying that all day. It's really great to be back at the conference. So inspiring to be here amongst so many change makers in one place at one time. I am from outside the industry. The connection I share with all of you, I think, is a passion for climate action. Looking around the room, I'm not sure you share my other passion, which is to be in the mosh pit at Blogstock Festival every August in Derbyshire, but see you in the pit if you're up for it. Someone did point out that with the title of my presentation, an allusion to the classics and Greek mythology, you might think I'm about to start talking about Boris Johnson. Please don't panic or leave the room. You're in a safe space. Transport is the largest emitting sector in the UK and globally a major contributor. We are looking at the need for a fundamental regime transition, both in technological and behavioural terms. This means we're dealing with the diffusion of innovation. Some of you may be familiar with this. And the idea is that, and here's our friend Sisyphus. If you don't know, Sisyphus was fated by the gods to, for all eternity, push a huge boulder up a slope, only to get nearly to the top for it to roll back down again. And Hercules, of course, defender of the weak with immense strength and power. With diffusion of innovation, you start with something that is atypical and a few innovators take it up, the 2.5%. If you get momentum built up, as we're seeing in the transport sector in some ways, you then have early adopters, you get near the top of the hill, you pass the early majority, and down it rolls with the late majority and the laggards following. That's what we're trying to achieve. So the question is, how are we doing? Well, this is the big picture. Looking at the data we have for the UK, total emissions for the transport sector divided by mode. And you'll note in particular, I've had the audacity of including international travel and transport, because otherwise we get away with saying, planes, little old me, I'm not really anything to do with this. You need to focus on the other things. But when you bring in international, what you can see is that car travel make up the biggest contributor, 2/5 of transport's emissions, tailpipe emissions, and in second place is aviation. So let's focus on those two areas. Well, in terms of electrification of the car fleet, good news you might say, we have 1 million battery electric vehicles in the UK at the moment. But bearing in mind the total car fleet is 34 million, that means in fact we have 3%. Still fairly good news because that means we've moved from innovators to early adopters in the diffusion of innovation. And we are seeing an increasing market share in new vehicle sales for pure battery electric. Let's now move across to aviation. Some of you may be familiar with this document published 2 years ago by the government. Jet Zero Strategy. Sounds good, doesn't it? Delivering net zero aviation by 2050. Are you taken in? Let's take a closer look. It's jet zero, but it's not net zero. It is net zero. It's not 0, 0. And this is the point. So if we look pre-COVID, 38 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. This strategy is assuming growth, glorious growth, 70% by 2050. And because of this strategy, we will be able to draw down what would have become 52 megatons per year down to 19 megatons. Those of you who are sharp at maths will have noticed that that means this jet zero strategy leaves about half of the emissions that we had pre-COVID still on our plates to be absorbed by magic somewhere else in the economy, and indeed reliant in this ambitious strategy upon technologies which are just about emerging into the marketplace with big uncertainty surrounding them. The reason I included international aviation is because those of you familiar with the interim carbon budgets, which are legally binding, for the first time from 2033, international aviation and shipping are part of what the government has to achieve in terms of getting to net zero by 2050. Good luck to our friend Sisyphus pushing the boulder up the slope of the diffusion of innovation. Now let's come to the Climate Change Committee, who, as you may know, write the school report each year for the government in terms of the progress it's been making towards its net zero strategy. And if we look at the 2022 school report, not really one to go home to your parents with a lot of jubilation. The government is failing in much of its implementation. Well, what about last year's report? Poor thing. Really not a good outlook for our predicted grades. Carbon budgets, the achievement that we're looking towards in the 5th and 6th of those has markedly declined in terms of the confidence that the school teacher has in the government. Let's take a closer look at my favourite subject, transport. How did the student do in that area? Well, first of all, it's the most important subject in our set that we're taking. First of all, no progress on clarifying the role for reducing car demand. No quantification of those areas which we should be focusing on for modal shift. Oh dear, those plug-in hybrids that seem so innocent and helpful are actually much poorer in performing in terms of carbon savings than was thought. And yes, the market share of electric vehicles is going up rather nicely, but the school teachers emphasise delivering the 2030 phase-out of new conventional car and van sales is vital. Now imagine you were the student and you'd taken that sobering feedback from your teacher. What might your reaction be? To double down and really make sure you improved your studies? Well, instead it would appear the student has been stamping her feet, or his feet in this case. You maybe note here this fantastic strapline to have when you're at the podium. Long-term decisions for a brighter future, ladies and gentlemen. The student seems to be responding to the bad reports it has received. But no, what does the student say to the teacher? We're going to ease the transition to electric vehicles. You'll still be able to buy petrol and diesel and vans, cars and vans until 2035. And in case the teacher was under any illusion about the student's intentions, the student put on his desk the plan for drivers. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a plan, in fact, for voters, I mean motorists. And the opening line of that document, I mean, you couldn't make this up. There's nothing wrong with driving. I mean, I drive a car, and even I know there's quite a lot wrong with driving. And as if this poor student's day wasn't bad enough, they've just been summoned to the headmaster's office again for poor performance, only earlier this month. So you see, the problem we have is that Sisyphus, although the boulder might not roll right back down the hill, we are pushing forwards with electric vehicles. Pushing that boulder up this slope is incredibly difficult. It takes a huge amount of energy and strength. And Sisyphus is not to be trusted. That's why the gods penalised him in the first place. So what he's also focused on is just technological fix. He's busily going for his favourite subject that is least politically toxic to push it up the slope. But really, what we need to get that boulder over the slope for the whole of transport is a Herculean effort. And a Herculean effort means not just doing technology fix, but also bringing in behaviour change. And it's Herculean because you need truly politically bold leaders to be able to do that. You know, the sort that actually make long-term decisions for a brighter future? Well, here's one of them. I'm not being paid for this. Lee Waters. Go and look him up if you don't know him, from Wales, the Minister for Climate Change. He's a leader that is really trying to bring the Herculean effort to help Sisyphus in the task ahead of us. You won't be surprised with the levers that we have in the transport sector to try and decarbonise. There are 3 of them. They're called avoid, shift, improve. Fairly straightforward. Avoid the need to travel where possible. If you do need to travel, shift and encourage people to shift to those modes that are most sustainable in terms of least tailpipe emissions. And where we're travelling in those modes that are most emitting, let's work to improve those modes in the way that we're electrifying the vehicle fleet to take the emissions away. We need to use all 3 of these. This is the theory that we would like to see, of course, put into practice. This is the practice. So instead of focusing on avoid first, moving to shift, improve. Improve looms large because it's easiest to deliver, and it looks like my slides have picked up their own momentum. So the fourth lever we have, bringing me to GEI16, is of course influence. The influence that the performers and their entourages can bring about with huge numbers of the general public. And when we're talking about influence, it's not simply about the carbon footprint of the performer and their entourage. And as you may know, the carbon footprint is a construct of the fossil fuel industry, rather conveniently created to allow distraction. But this lady, Emma Pate, came up with this brilliant idea, I think, if you've not heard of it, called the climate shadow. And this, I think, is very, very relevant to all the performers and the live events we've been talking about today. And if you'll indulge me, I'll just read out this quote from Emma Pate. Think of your climate shadow as a dark shape stretching out behind you. Everywhere you go, it goes too, tallying not just your air conditioning use and the gas mileage of your car, but also how you vote, how many children you choose to have, where you work, how you invest your money, how much you talk about climate change, and whether your words amplify urgency, apathy, or denial. So what we're looking to in our performers is to exercise and invigorate their audiences in terms of the urgency and agency we need to bring to climate action right now, which I don't need to persuade you of. Now, this person, of course, has been in it for quite a lot of today, I understand. This is probably the world's biggest influencer right now, and I understand that the private jet concerned emitted 8,000 tonnes of carbon dioxide last year. The average for the world per capita is 4.7 tonnes. But don't worry, carbon offsets have been paid, so much so that you can nip backwards and forwards to watch the Super Bowl in between performing and influencing. Just to give you a quick comparison, I'm travelling to Stockholm next month by train. My university complained that it was going to cost 4 times as much as going by plane, and I did point out I don't fly anymore. But when I did fly 5 years ago to Stockholm, anyone like to guess how much I paid to offset that journey, return to be guilt-free? Shout out a number. How many pounds? 50, 10, 4, 5, £6. It was 5 years ago. I mean, inflation, come on. Who could possibly afford on top of their flights to pay the carbon offset? So can it be as simple as offsetting our way out of this hellhole we've got ourselves into? I can't quite think so, particularly as those forests are burning and some of the plants that get put in the ground don't make it to maturity. Thank goodness, I think, I'm sorry if I'm getting political in musical terms here, thank goodness we have the likes of Coldplay, which I think are trying much more authentically to walk the walk in a difficult space, because in the end, they have to bring their performance to their adoring fans. But they're trying to do that. Think about avoid, shift, improve. They're genuinely trying to see where they can avoid, shift, and improve, unlike perhaps the previous performer. And so I'll leave you the final slide, coming back to our conversation for a few minutes. I hope you've heard this earlier today. Why do we need influencers more than ever this year? Because half the world is going to the ballot box. There couldn't be a more critical time, I think, in human history for us to get this right. And the influencers out there, this industry has such a huge part to play. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we've got 1 minute for questions, so let's just have a 1 or 2 questions from the audience. Anyone got any burning things they want to ask Glenn whilst we've got him in the room?
Sorry.
Okay, well, that is actually at time, but I think that would be perfect time to move on if we haven't got any questions.
No worries.
But thank you so much. That was really, really interesting, and I love the connotations there.